I'm gonna rotate you guys, get you situated here. Putting on some gloves today. It's a nice day to be outside. Trying to get these tucked over. Almost got this one. Alright, let's start the stream by doing some dishes. And we'll review what we went over in Redwall yesterday. So, first, Clooney. He got one of his henchmen to jump on the back of a horse and get to start running off with all of them in the back. Then, the feast at Redwall got wrapped up. Everyone started leaving the Abbey. And then when they were going home, the striped dog, the badger, Constance, what did she do? She was carrying the cart, and she got them off the road as the rats ran by with their horses, and then the rats made camp at a church and started giving out orders to all their men on what to do to take over the surrounding area. So things are in the works right now. They're going down. All right. Dry my hands. I'll show you the towel. It's a Christmas towel. Does anyone know what these flowers are? Poinsettia is one of them. I don't know if there's white poinsettias, but the red one's a poinsettia. They're poisonous, don't eat them. Okay, so we're on chapter 7. Let's get started. Here's the art. To me, it looks like a moon, maybe, or an eclipse, a solar or lunar eclipse, and stars. Matthias had never stayed up all night in his life. He was just a bit tired, but strangely excited. Great events seemed to have been set in motion by his news. Immediately upon being informed by the Hake Heart incident, the abbot had insisted upon calling a special council meeting of all Redwall creatures. Once again, Cavern Hall was packed to the doors. But this time, it was for a purpose very different from the feast. Constance, the badger, and Matthias, the young mouse, stood in front of the council of elders. All about them was a hum of whispers and muttering. Abbot Mortimer called out, "Order!" by ringing a small bell. "Pay attention, everyone. Constance and Matthias, would you please tell the council what you saw on the road tonight?" Says St. Ninians. As clearly as they could, the badger and the young mouse related the incidents of the rat-infested hay cart. The council began to question them. "Rats, you say, Matthias? What type of rat?" inquired Sister Clemence. New character. "Big ones," Matthias replied, "though I'm afraid I couldn't say what kind they were or where they had come from." "What about you, Constance?" "Well, I remember that my old granddad once knew a sea rat. Going by his description, I'd say that's what they look like to me." And Constance is a lady. And whenever I do good guy lady voices, I do like a southern drawl. Like, I'll show you one more time. "Well, I remember that my old granddad once knew a sea rat. Going by the description, I don't know, I'd say that's what they look like to me." "And about how many would you say were of these rats? About how many would you say there were of these rats?" Father Abbot asked. "Couldn't say for sure, Father Abbot. There must have been hundreds." "Matthias?" "Oh yes, Father. I agree with Constance. At least 400. "Did you notice anything about them, Constance?" "Indeed I did, Father Abbot. My badger sense tells me right off that these were bad and evil rats. Very bad." The badger's statement caused uproar and shouts. "Nonsense! Pure speculation! That's right! Give a rat a bad name!" The council is going into an uproar. Without even thinking, Matthias raised a paw and shouted aloud, "Constance is right. I could feel it myself. There was one huge rat with a ferret skull on a pole. I got a good look at him, and it seemed like something. It was like seeing a horrible monster." In the silence that followed, the abbot rose and confronted Matthias. Stooping slightly, he stared into the young mouse's bright eyes. "Think carefully, my son. Was there anything special you noticed about this rat?" Matthias thought for a moment. Everyone was watching him. "He was much bigger than the others, Father." What else, Matthias? Think." "I remember he only had one eye." "Right or left?" "Left, I think." "Yes, it was the left, Father." "Now, can you crawl anything about his tail?" "I certainly can," Matthias squeaked. "It must have been the longest tail on a rat alive." He held out to his claw as if it were a whip. He held it to his claws as if it were a whip. The abbot paced up and down, turning to the assembly. "Twice in my lifetime I've heard travelers speak of this rat." He bears a name that a fox would be afraid to whisper in the darkness of midnight. Clooney, the Scourge. A deathly hush fell upon the creatures in Cavern Hall. Clooney the Scourge? Surely not. He was only some kind of folk legend. A warning used by mothers when youngsters were fractious or disobedient. Go to sleep or Clooney will come get you. Eat your dinner or Clooney will come. Come in this instant or I'll tell Clooney. Statements by family members. Most creatures didn't even know what Clooney was. He was just some sort of bogey that lived in a bad dream and the dark corners of imagination. The silence was broken by scornful snorts and diverse laughter. Furry elbows nudged down ribs. Mice were beginning to smile from sheer relief. Clooney the Scourge indeed. Feeling a bit abashed, they don't believe them, is what just happened. They're laughing about it. This is what everyone does in a moment of crisis. Think of Chernobyl. Or the Nuremberg trials. Feeling slightly abashed, Matthias and Constance looked pleadingly toward the abbot for support. Abbot Mortimer's old face was stern as he shook the bell vigorously for silence. Mice of Redwall, I see that there's those among you who would doubt the word of your abbot. A quiet but authoritative tone caused an embarrassed shuffling from council leaders. Brother Joseph stood up and cleared his throat. Good father, abbot, all respect your word and look to you for guidance. But really, I mean, Sister Clement stood up smiling. She spread her paws wide. Perhaps Clooney is coming to get us for staying up late. A roar of laughter greeted the iconic words. Because just remember, we read, go to sleep or Clooney will come get you. So she pulled out a nursery rhyme and said, hey, this threat that's coming, I kind of feel like it doesn't matter, and we should all just ignore it because we've been rhyming about it for so long. That's probably not real. Constance's back hairs bristled. She gave an angry growl, followed by a fierce bark. Oh! The mice huddled together with fright. Nobody ever seen a snarling, angry badger at a council meeting. So Constance just got up and she's like, oh! And everyone started getting real scared. Before they could recover, Constance was on her hind legs, having her say, "I've never seen such a pack of empty-headed mice. You should all be ashamed. Ashamed of yourselves. Giggling here like silly little otter cubs. That giggling here like silly little otter cubs that have caught a beetle. I never thought I'd live to see the day the elders of Redwall act in this way." Constance hunched her heavy shoulders and glared about with a ferocity that set them trembling. "Now listen to me. Take heed of what your father Abbot has said, and has to say. The next creature who utters a squeak will answer to me. Understand?" The badger bowed low in a dignified manner, gesturing with her massive, blunt paw. "The floor is yours, father." "Thank you, Constance, my good and faithful friend," the abbot murmured. He looked about him, shaking his head gravely. "I have little more to say on the subject, but I see that you still need convincing. So here is my proposal. We will send out 2 mice to relieve the gatehouse. Let's see, yes, Brother Rufus and George. Would you please go out and take over for Brother Methuselah? Please send him in here to me. Tell him to bring the Traveler's record volumes, not the parent issue, but the older editions, which were used in past years." Rufus and George, both solid-looking, sensible mice, took their leave with a formal bow to the abbot. Through a high-sitting window, Matthias could see the rosy pink and golden fingers of dawn stealing down to cavern hole as the candles began to flicker and smoke into stubs. All in the space of a night's events had moved the festivity to a crisis, and he, Matthias, had taken a major role in both. First, the big railing, and then the setting of the cart. Large happenings for a small mouse. Brother Methuselah had kept the abbey records for as long as any creature could remember. It was his life's work and consuming passion. Beside the official chronicle of Redwall, he also kept his personal volumes full of valuable information. Traveling creatures, migratory birds, wandering foxes, rambling squirrels, gulrius hares. They all stopped and chatted with the old mouse, partaking of his hospitality, never dreaming of hurting him in any way. Methuselah had the gift of tongues. He could understand any creature, even a bird. He was an extraordinary old mouse who lived in the company of his volumes and in the solitude of the gatehouse. Seated in the Father Abbot's own chair, Methuselah took his spectacles from a moss-barked case, carefully perching them on the brim of his nose. All gathered around to hear as he opened a record book and spoke in a squeaky, barely above a whisper. Me, Lord Abbot Creedic, it is Sirdy, isn't it? Oh, brethren, nation, you're the new abbot, Abbot Mortimer, the one who came after Cedric. Oh dear me, I've seen so many of them come and go now, you know? Me, Lord Abbot Mortimer, and members of Redwall, I refer to the record of Winter 6 back. Here the ancient mouse took a while to leaf through the pages. Ah yes, here it is. Late in November, year of the small sweet chestnut. From a frozen sparrowhawk, come down from far north. Peculiar chap spoke with a strange accent. I repaired his right wing, pin feather, news of a mine disaster caused by a large savage sea rat with an extraordinary tail. It seems that this rat, Clooney they called him, wanted to settle his army in the mine. The badgers and other creature who owned the mine drove them out. Clooney returned by night with his band of rats and gnawed away, undermined much of the wooden shoring. This caused the mine to collapse the next day, killing the owners. So Clooney's famous. He killed a bunch of badgers that were the owners of the mine just a little while away because they wouldn't give it to him, and they fought him off and they lost, and so they said, okay, how can we destroy their place of where they lived? Don't worry though. It'll get better. Brother Methuselah closed the volume and looked over his glasses at the assembly. I have no need to read further. I can recite other misdeeds from memory. At the hordes of Clooney, the scourge has moved out southward over the past 6 years. I've gathered intelligence of other incidents. A farmhouse set alight later that same year. Piglets, an entire litter of them eaten alive by rats. Sickness and disease spread throughout livestock herds by Clooney's army. There's even a report to me 2 years ago by a town dog. An army of rats stampeded a herd of cows through a village, causing chaos and destruction. Methuselah halted and blinked over his spectacles. And you dare doubt the word of our abbot, that Clooney the Scourge exists? What idiot mice you are, to be sure. Methuselah's words caused widespread consideration. There was much agitated nibbling of paws. Nobody could doubt he spoke the truth. He was already old and wise when most elderly among them was a blindless, hairless mite plugging and whimpering for a feed from its mother. Oh my whiskers, what a mess. Hadn't we better pack up and move? Maybe Clooney will spare us? Oh dear, what shall we do? Matthias sprang to the middle of the floor, brandishing his staff in a way that even surprised him. Do! He cried. I tell you what we'll do. We'll be ready. The abbot could not help shaking his head in admiration. It seemed that young Matthias had hidden depths. Why, thank you, Matthias, he said. I could not have put it better myself. That's exactly what we will do. We'll be ready. Woo! That was a chapter. A little bit longer than the other ones. We looked at like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. Not bad. Let me show you what's coming up. There's a sword. Let me drink some tea. Give me a second. I forgot I wasn't on stream. You can see the tea bag. It's strong tea. Water's still warm though. Oh, my old man, he's always drinking his tea and he forgets his cup everywhere. And he's always like, oh, I was going to make some tea. And it's like, you're holding your teacup, Dad. It's like, I'm just being mean. He might be watching. Okay. Let's take a break because it relaxes me. And we're going to go over that chapter that we just read about. So, in that chapter, we read about Methuselah coming back into Redwall Abbey and the gate guards getting relieved because Constance the Badger and Matthias gave their story to Abbot Mortimer. And I have another thing I'll be doing maybe when I die in between when I play games, and it's a coin. And I like to flip it, and it helps me like a fidget spinner. And so this is just like a fidget spinner for me. It helps me so much. You guys get to hear the water moving around. There's a fountain in the background. But that's what happened in that chapter. Methuselah was brought over into the Abbey. We went over everything that they talked about. Constance woofed at everyone in the lobby and in the Abbey, and then Abbot Mortimer got the floor, and he started talking just to everybody. He's like, please listen to Brother Methuselah. He's going to explain that Clooney the Scourge is real, and he's been doing this for a while, and we need to get prepared. So all in all, it's about everyone trying to get prepared. And Matthias, at the very end, rallied everybody and said, we can do this because we are mice of Redwall. And it's like, that's very cool. All right, here we go. We're going to read chapter 8, and then we're going to read one more chapter after that, and then we're going to call it a day. So we got 2 more chapters to go. Bear with me, chat. These might be long. Clooney the Scourge was having nightmares. He had laid down in the church mice bed for a well-earned rest while his army was going about its allotted task. He had never tried to sleep on an empty stomach, but weariness overcame his hunger. He should never have tried to sleep on an empty stomach, but weariness overcame his hunger. In Clooney's dreams, everything was shrouded in a red mist. The cries of his victims rang out as barns blazed and ships foundered on a stormy Red Sea. Cattle bellowed below in pain as he battled with the pike that had taken his eye. Oh, this is his nightmare. We're describing it. The warlord thrashed about, conquering and laying waste to all in his dream. Then the phantom figure appeared. At first, so Clooney was having a nightmare, and then he started killing everyone in his nightmare, and he started enjoying it. Now he just got visited by a specter. First, it seemed a small thing, a mouse in fact, dressed in a long hooded robe. Clooney did not relish meeting with it. He could not tell why, but the mouse kept getting closer to him. For the first time in his life, he turned and ran. Clooney went like a bat out of hell. Glancing back, he saw all the carnage, death, and misery he had caused in his career. Scenes of desolation and destruction wreaked by him. Clooney, the Scourge. Floating through the red mist, he could still see the strange mouse hard on his heels. Clooney felt himself filled with hatred for his pursuer. It seemed to have grown larger. Its eyes were cold and grim, deep inside. Give me a sec, chat. This chapter's giving me a little trouble. It seemed to have grown larger. Its eyes were cold and grim. Deep inside, Clooney knew that he could not frighten this oddly garbed mouse. Now, it was wielding a large, bright sword, an ancient weapon of terrible beauty. The battle-scarred blade had a word written upon it that he could not make out. Sweat dripped from Clooney's claws like stinging acid. He stumbled. Then the strange figure drew closer. It had grown into a giant. Clooney's legs felt as if they were bursting. He realized that he had slowed up and the mouse was getting closer. He tried to put on an extra burst of speed, but his legs would not obey. They ran more and more slowly, more and more heavily. Clooney cursed at his leaden limbs. He saw he was trapped in deep icy mud. For the first time, he knew the meaning of mindless fear and panic. He turned slowly. Too late. The enemy was upon him. He was rooted helplessly in the spot. The avenging mouse swung the sword up high, and millions of lights flashed from the deadly blade as it struck. Bong! The loud toll in the distance of Joseph Bell brought Clooney whirling back from the realm of nightmare to cold reality. He shivered, wiping the sweat from his fur with a shaky hand. Saved by the bell. He was puzzled. What did the fearful dream mean? Clooney had never been one to put his faith in omens, but this dream, it felt so lifelike and vivid that he shuddered. A timid paw tapping at the door snapped Clooney from his reverie with a start. Reverie. A timid paw tapping on the door snapped Clooney from his reverie with a start. It was Ragier and Mangefur, his scavengers. They slunk into the room, each trying to hide behind the other, knowing the poor results of their search were likely to incur the chief's wrath. Their assumption was correct. Clooney's bayfly watched them as his long, flexible tail sorted through the partly offerings which dropped from their claws. A few dead beetles, two large earthworms, some undefined vegetation, a pitiful carcass of a long dead sparrow. Clooney smiled at Ragier and Mangefur. With a sign of relief, they grinned back at him. The chief was in a good mood. At lightning speed, the big rat's claws shot out and grabbed them both cruelly by the ears. The stupid hench rats yowled piteously as they were lifted bodily from the floor and swung to and fro. In a fit of rage, Clooney bashed their heads together. Half senseless, they were hurled towards the doorway with his angry words ringing in their skulls. Beetles? Worms? Rotten sparrows? Get me meat. Tender, young, red meat. Next time you bring me rubbish like this, I'll split the pair of you and have you roasted in your own juice. Is that clear? Mangefur pointed an accusing claw at his companion. Please, Chief, it was Ragier's fault. If we had gone across the fields instead of up the road, don't believe that fat liar, Chief. It was him who suggested to go up the road, not me. Get out! The scavengers dashed off, bumping clumsily into each other with a panic as they tried to get through the door together. Clooney slumped back on the bed and snorted impatiently. Fogblood and Scumnose were next to report. They bore news that cheered Clooney up somewhat. They obtained a few hundred new recruits, mainly rats, but with a good scattering of ferrets and weasels. An odd soda. Soat. There had been some who needed convincing, though these had been press-ganged by a savage beating from frog blood, coupled with the threat of horrible death. They were soon convinced the wisest course was to enlist in Clooney's army, enlist in Clooney's horde. Others were hungry nomads, only too willing to join up in the infamous Clooney. They were greedy for plunder and booty. and pleased to be on the side, and pleased to be what they were sure would be the winning side. Lined up in the churchyard, the recruits were supplied with weaponry by Redtooth and Darkclaw. Impassively, they stood in ranks, awaiting the warlord's inspection. Clooney nodded his approval. Scurry rats, hungry ferrets, sly weasels, bad stoats, exactly what we needed. Read 'em the articles, Redtooth, he snapped. Redtooth swaggered back and forth on the churchyard paving and recited the formula from memory. Right, eyes front. You're in the service of Clooney the Scourge now. You hear me, buckos? Dessert, and you'll be killed. Retreat, and you're under sentence of death. Disobey, and you'll die. I'm Redtooth, Clooney's #1 rat. You'll obey the word of your captains and take orders from me. Take orders from Clooney. Now, if any one, two, or a group, or even all of you together want to try and beat Clooney and lead the horde, this is your chance. Without warning, Clooney charged headlong into the new recruits, lashing wildly with his scourging tail. He bowled them left and right and center with his massive strength, baring his teeth and slitting his eye. He whipped fiercely away until they fell back and scattered in disorder. Hiding behind gravestones, Clooney threw back his head and roared with laughter. No guts, eh? Ha, it's just as well I don't want him dead on my claws before I find a proper battle for you to fight with. And it makes no mistake, when the right time comes, you'll fight, aye, and die too. Now raise your weapons, and let's see if you know your master is. A motley collection of evil-looking implements were framed by the cloudless sky, as wild cries rang out to the newly inducted recruits. Clooney, Clooney, Clooney the Scourge. One more chapter. Let's do this. We got this, chat. Whatever you see there, I won't tell you. Drinking some tea. I have a barbecue today to go to, chat. I got some chicken for it. I'll cook that up later and I'll bring it up there. I'm going to bake it. It's chicken tenders. The store didn't have any fresh chicken. Maybe they did. Maybe I didn't look in the right spot. I didn't look in the right spot. I'm thinking about it now. I just got frozen chicken. Alright. Alright, chat. Last chapter. We're heading back to the Abbey. So, starting with, we're leaving that camp. We were just talking to about. Let's go over that chapter actually. That's what I should do every chapter. Go over the chapter. Clooney was visited by a specter in his dream, and then he started fighting him off and started running away and felt fear for the first time in his life. And then he woke up and the scavengers came in, Rag-Ear and Mange-Fur, and they were really nervous to give their report. And so they gave their report. Clooney beat him up a little bit, and then he went to go check on the new recruits. Then he basically bullied the new recruits and made sure they'd all honor him as the leader. And then he got them all to run in fear. They all held up their weapons and chanted his name. So now they're part of the new Clooney horde. And now we're back at the Abbey with Abbot Mortimer and Constance the Badger meandered through the grounds together. Both creatures were deep in thought. Had they spoken and voiced their thoughts, they would have mentioned the same subject, the safety of Redwall. Down long ages, the beautiful old abbey had stood for happiness, peace, and refuge to all. Diligent mice tended the neat little vegetable patches where every season gave forth an abundance of fresh produce, cabbages, sprouts, marrows, turnips, peas, carrots, tomatoes, lettuce, and onions, all in their turn. Flower beds had fragrant flower beds, heated and fragrant, with countless varieties of summer blooms, from rose to humble daisy, where planted by mice and husband by the working bee. Brian Jacques loves to describe the environment. Husband by the hard-working bee folk, who in their turn rewarded Redwall with plentiful supplies of honey and beeswax. The two friends wandered onwards, past the pond. Early morning sunlight glinted off the water, throwing out ripples from the fish caught by the overnight lines, which were baited and left to drift each evening by Brother Ulf. Ahead of them lay the berry hedges, raspberry, blackberry, bilberry, and strawberry patch, where every August sleepy baby creatures could be seen, their stomachs full after picking the crop. Gradually, they made their way around the big old chestnut tree into the orchard. This was the abbot's favorite spot. Many a leisure nap he had taken on this sunny afternoon, with the aroma of ripening fruit hovering in his whiskers. Apples, pears, quinus, plums, damsons, and even a vine of wild grape, or the warm red stone facing even a wild grape on the warm red stone of a south-facing wall of old Mother Nature's blessing, laying upon a haven of warm friendliness. Now with the threat of Clooney upon Redwall, The two old friends assessed the beauteous bounty of their lifelong abode. Sweet birdsong on still air tinged, Constance's heart with sorrow and regret that this peaceful existence would soon pass. Gruffly she tugged, gruffly she snuffled under deep in her throat, blinking off a threatening teardrop. The abbot sensed his companion's distress. He patted the badger's rough coat with a gentle paw. There you go, old dear. Don't fret. Many times in our history has tragedy forestalled by miraculous happenings. Been forestalled by miraculous happenings. Constance grunted in agreement, not wishing to disillusion or trusting her old friend. Deep within her, she knew a dark shadow was casting itself over the abbey. Furthermore, it was happening in the present, not in the bygone days of fabled deeds. Matthias spread himself to an early breakfast in Cavern Hall. So we're switching to Matthias. Constance and Abbot Mortimer were just sitting together and reminiscing on how good life has been for the war that's coming. Hopefully not. A quick saying. By a League of Legends character. Karma. If you desire peace, you must prepare for war. Matthias seated himself to an early breakfast in Cavern Hall. Nut bread, apples, and a bowl of fresh goat's milk. Cornflower, along with other woodland creatures, granted sanctuary, was sleeping in makeshift quarters provided by the good mice of Redwall. Matthias felt like he'd grown up overnight. Duty was a mantle that he had taken willingly upon his shoulders. If there was a threat to Redwall from the outside, it must be dealt with. The mice of Redwall were peaceful creatures, but that must not be taken as a sign of weakness. Stolidly, he munched away as he confronted the problem. I'm gonna take a sip of tea, chat. Eat hearty, Matthias. No point in facing trouble on an empty stomach. Feed the body, nourish the mind. The young mouse was surprised to see that old brother Methuselah had been watching him. His eyes twinkling behind the curious spectacles he invariably wore. The ancient mouse sat down at the breakfast table with a small groan. Don't look so surprised, young one. Your face is an open book to one of my many years. Matthias drained the last of his milk from the bowl, wiping the cream from his whiskers with the back of his paw. Give me your advice, Brother Methuselah, he said. What would you do? The old mouse wrinkled his nose. Exactly the same thing as you would, that is, if I were younger and not so old and stiff. Matthias felt he had found an ally. You mean you would fight? Methuselah rapped the table with a big bony paw. It doesn't say big, it just says bony paw. With a bony paw. Of course I would. It's the only sensible course to take. He paused and stared at Matthias in an odd manner. You know, there's something about you, young fella. Did you ever know the story of how Martin the warrior came to Redwall? Matthias leaned forward eagerly. Martin, tell me, brother. I love hearing about the warrior monk. Methuselah's voice dropped into a secretive whisper. Before we go any further, chat, I'm going to take 5, put the book down. I'm going to go check on Kate, my daughter. I want to go see her. Okay, I see her. Love you, baby. She likes to sit on this balcony above, and she shouldn't, but she does. She's a cat. It is written in the Great Chronicle of Redwall that Martin was very young to be such a warrior. He could have been the same age as you, Matthias. Like you, he was impulsive and had a great quality of a youthful innocence about him when he first came to our abbey. But it was also written that in times of trouble, Martin had a true gift of a natural leader, a command over others far superior to him in age and experience. The Chronicle says that they looked to Martin as some look to strong father. As some look to a strong father. Matthias was full of wonderment, but he could not help feeling puzzled. Why do you tell me this, brother, Methuselah? The old mouse stood up. He stared hard at Matthias for a moment, and then, turning, he shuffled off slowly. As he went, he called over his shoulder, Because, Matthias, because he was very like you. Before the young mouse could question the older one further, the Joseph bell tolled out a warning. Sandals flapping, Matthias dashed into the grounds, nearly colliding with the abbot and Constance, who, like everyone else, were heading for the gatehouse. Brother Rufus and George had an instant to report. A large, evil-looking rat, covered in tattoos, carrying a rusty cutlass, had turned up at the gate. He tried to gain entry by pretending he was injured, limping about. The rat explained that he had been in a hay cart that had overturned in the ditch. When would they come with him and render assistance to his friends, many of whom were lying trapped beneath and crying for help? Brother Rufus was no fool. How many rats were traveling in the cart altogether, he asked. Oh, a couple hundred, came the glib reply. So the rats are at Redwall. The Abbey is about to be maybe attacked. We got one more page, chat. We can do this. One more page. Front, back, front, back. So 2. Then why, reasoned Brother Rufus, did rats not give aid to their own companions? Surely all 200 were not trapped? The rat evaded the question and made a great show of rubbing his injured leg. Could they not take him in and dress his wound, perhaps? Give him a bite to eat, at least? Brother George agreed, on condition that the rat surrender his weapon. The rat made as if to do so, and then suddenly lunged at Brother George, only to be sent sprawling by Brother Rufus' staff. Realizing that he was up against 2 big, competent mice who would stand no nonsense, he became abusive and bad-mouthed. Ha, just you wait, mice, he raged. There's a whole army of us camped down in the church. When I tell Clooney how you treated me, ho ho ho, just wait. That's all. We'll be back by the fang, we will. With that, he slunk off, cursing the mice. The grim news was digested in silence by the assembled creatures. Miss Churchill began sobbing. Oh, dearie me, did you not hear that? They must be living in our home at the Nin's church. Oh, whatever shall we do? Our little home full of dreadful brats. John Churchmouse tried to comfort her, as best he could. There, there. Hush now, missus. Better to lose a house than our lives. A good job. We got sanctuary here at Redwall. But what about the creatures in the area? Cried Matthias. Sensible mouse, said Constance. Is Ambrose Spike somewhere about? He'd better do the rounds and tell them to take sanctuary here at the Abbey as well. He'd better do the rounds and tell them take sanctuary here at the Abbey as quickly as possible. Spike, come to no harm. Spike will come to no harm. Once he curls up, there's nothing that can touch him. The idea was greeted with enthusiasm. Brother Alf went off to find the hedgehog, and the abbot suggested they go inside the abbey and await further developments. Matthias piped up again. We'd best mount a guard on the wall. One of the older mice, Sixter Clemens, chided Matthias as an upstart. Her voice was stern and condescending. Now, vis, Matthias, you will be silent and do as Abbot commands. Much to everyone's surprise, and the Abbot came to speak in Matthias's defense. One moment, Clemens. Matthias speaks sense. Let us hear what he has to say. We are none of us too old to learn. All eyes turned on the young mouse as Matthias heard himself boldly outline plans for the defense of Redwall. Woo! I love reading this book, chat. So we should cover what we just did. We have We have maybe like a page left. Okay, so this one started with everyone getting situated in the abbey. Matthias eating some food. Brother Methuselah coming over and bothering him. Not bothering, just talking to him and trying to give him advice. And then everyone got called out to the courtyard by the bell because Joseph Bell. So Joseph Bell told, and then they all went out to the gatehouse where Brother Rufus and Brother George, where they confronted this guy and they basically disarmed him and said, "Get out of here." And then the rat said that he's going to go report back to Clooney everything that happened. And Matthias is now in charge of Redwall defense because he just outlined the plans. He might not be giving all the orders, but he outlined the plans for the defense. It was 11 o'clock on the glorious June morning. Mossflower wood and the meadows stirred to the brazen voice of the Joseph Bell. John Churchmouse heaved on the bell rope as he had been told to by Constance and Matthias. Boom, 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 bong, bong, bong. Even the small creatures in the wood and field could understand no language save their own, knew what that meant. Time of danger, place of sanctuary. Carrying with simple belongings they needed, woodlanders and their families hurried from far and near to gain the safety of the abbey, before the storm of Clooney broke upon them. Squirrels, mice, voles, otters, all save the birds of the air, who were safe anyway. Upon the long dusty road they came, mothers protective, herding young ones, while fathers provided a rear guard. Brother Methuselah stood at the gate with the abbot. He translated fully to, thank you. He translated fully to each other group of creatures the abbot's message. Because remember, Brother Methuselah can speak every language, which is cool. He's like a computer, but for saying like hola and hello and stuff like that. Brother Methuselah stood at the gate with the abbot. He translated fully to each group of creatures the abbot's message, in turn constructing back to the father abbots their grateful thanks with pledges to help and loyalty to Redwall Abbey. For what creature had not been freely given the aid? For what creature had not been freely given the aid and special knowledge of their kindly mice, all knew they owed their very existence to the abbot and his community. Healing aid, food, shelter, and good advice were granted to all. Now was the time to unite and repay and to give help that was possible. Before much longer, Redwall would require the skills and knowledge of all its woodland allies. They would be grateful. They would be gratefully given. Let me drink some tea, chat. We have three paragraphs left. Matthias and Constance stood atop the high perimetered walls, watching the road. It was noon, and the sun shone directly overhead. Despite the heat, Matthias had ordered all the mice to put on their hoods, to serve a double purpose, to shield their eyes from the sun and to create a camouflage effect. Silently, each one stood armed with a stout staff. The high redstone walls were too lofty to be scaled by any normal creature. Instinctively, Matthias knew this was a good defense and formidably deterrent, and a formidable deterrent. Constance could feel her hackles beginning to prickle. She sniffed the air and shivered, despite the fact that the shimmered waves across, despite the heat that shimmered across the waves, shimmered waves across the meadowland. She shivered because she had a fear, or like a sixth sense, and she was saying it was unnatural because it was hot out. The big badger nudged Matthias. Listen to that. Matthias pricked his ears and looked at her, questioning. Even the birds have stopped singing, Constance said. The young mouse gripped his staff tighter. Yes, it's the silence we can hear. The grasshoppers have gone quiet. Constance peered down the road and spoke. Strange for a summer day, little friend. Bong. Every creature standing in the ramparts twitched in fright as the loud voice of the Joseph bell rang out, and George Churchmouse shouted from his position, "They're coming down the road! I can see them!" So John Churchmouse just rang the bell. To let them know that the scourge is almost upon them. Let me recap everything that we've gone over today, because we read a lot, more than usual. Let's start with chapter 7. This image. They called everyone to the Great Hall. Matthias and Constance gave their report. No one believed them. Methuselah made them all believe them. They decided to start getting ready. Clooney the Scourge had a nightmare. It was about a mouse running at him, and he felt fear for the first time. We get back to the Abbey. People are getting situated after getting to the Abbey. Matthias and Constance are talking. They're getting ready for wall defense. And they meet a rat. He comes by the gate, and brothers Rufus and George. See if that's right. Rufus and George. Okay. I'll show you the next chapter, what we're looking at. It was a pleasure, chat. I will be here tomorrow, not dressed up like this. I get dressed like this because I like to go out to barbecues on Sundays. Fun to hang out with people. I wish you all the very best. Stay safe. Stay strong. Oh, you know what? I'm going to sing you guys the hymn. Because I do it every day. Almost. There's been a day I've forgotten. Sometimes things get away from me. But almost every day I sing the hymn. So I will sing you the hymn one more time. And then we'll call the stream. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. Our flags unfurled to every breeze, from dawn to setting sun. We have fought in every clime and place where you could take a gun. In the snow of far-off northern lands, and in sunny tropic scenes, you will find us always on the job, the United States Marines. Here's health to you and to our corps, which we are proud to serve. In many a strife we fought for life and never lost our nerve. If the Army and the Navy ever looked on heaven's scenes, they will find the streets are guarded by United States Marines. Semper Fi. Hoorah. Well, that's our stream chat. I will show you the fountain. Give me a second. Here you go. Be nice. There's someone in that photo. Semper Fi. Thanks for stopping by, chat.